This is my review of the Sony A5100. Now, those of you who follow along and are subscribers know that I recently returned from a just spectacular photo trip in Italy. You can read and hear all about that with the links right down below. But before I went, I asked you all, I said, what kind of camera should I take besides my 5D Mark III? My 5D Mark III goes pretty much everywhere with me. It is the camera I use for weddings, and it is the basis for many of my comparisons and reviews, fair or not. Many people suggested, well, there was a variety of cameras suggested, but there were quite a few that leaned towards these kind of smaller cameras with larger sensors. You've got the Sony RX100 Mark III now that has a 1-inch sensor. You've got some new cameras that weren't quite out in time for me to take, like the LX100 with a micro four thirds sensor in there. You've got Canon's own 1-inch sensor cameras. Sony really trumps all of that with a full, I shouldn't say full because it's not full frame, but it is a much larger sensor than those because it's an APS-C size sensor. The same thing that you get in your entry-level DSLRs from Canon and Nikon, and also the same from the Fuji X-T1. They've packaged that APS-C sensor in an incredibly small and light body. For those of you who have watched my A6000 review, you know I gushed over the fact that it was so light and so compact, but still provided excellent image quality. We've got basically the same sensor in here in an even smaller body, and the image quality is fantastic, and it was a dream to carry around something so light. But was it the perfect travel camera? Did I love it? Well, let's run down through the pros and cons. I've already hit on the first one, the size. With the kit lens, which is a power zoom from 16 to 50, very, very light. A little prime lens, the 20 f2.8, I also carried around with me, which is honestly a little lighter, but not really any smaller than the kit lens for lower light situations. Still, very light, very pocketable sized camera. That's a plus. Size, weight, lovely. Another plus is, I mentioned, the APS-C size sensor. Really high quality, really happy. I've got shots up in the range of 3200 ISO that I am happy with. And that right there should say a lot about the quality of the sensor. Good dynamic range. Sony's been making really nice sensors. This camera's got one of them. Along with the high quality images, you've got the option of high quality video with that XAVCS. You can shoot 1080p at 60 frames a second, 50 megabyte bit rate, and it looks great. Very nice. One of the other reasons why this camera appealed to me is I wanted to be able to do kind of like daily videos in Italy, and I thought we'd be doing some of them on the move, and it's got this little snazzy selfie screen so we can just flip it up. Those videos were a little bit rougher than maybe I liked. Oop, just took a picture of myself. But it is really nice, and we actually did have a lot of fun with this little selfie screen. You certainly can with cameras without selfie screen and that have wireless. Bring up your phone, organize it in such a way or point it in such a way that it's going to be in focus and take your picture. But it was really nice to have this self-contained unit pointed at us, holding it out and taking pictures. We looked silly, but there were a lot of other people holding up their cell phones on selfie sticks that looked even sillier. So take it for what you're worth. That was a nice feature, but we'll talk about what you give up in just a second. The battery life in such a small camera is not great. For good or bad, I'm going to say for good mostly, it charges via USB. It doesn't come with an external battery charger, though you could buy one if you'd like. You should get an extra battery, but I have to say there were several days in Italy where this was the only camera I shot with, and I shot with it all day long, and it lasted if during lunchtime I plugged it into a little battery backup that you use to charge your phone. I love the ones from Rav Power. I'll put a link to my review about that and buying it right down below. But during lunch, in a half an hour or 45 minutes of sitting down, it would be charged up plenty to last the rest of the day. The big caveat though is that was mostly photos. When I did want to shoot video, I saw the battery drain very, very quickly. An hour-long hike where I shot a couple of 5 to 10 minute video clips over the course of that hike, I saw the battery drop to as low as 30%. And I had started with it around 80 to 90%, so about half a drop. So if you're planning on doing a lot of video, definitely buy some spare batteries. And it will not charge while you're using it, or another way to say that is you cannot power it from a USB battery. You can only charge it from a USB battery. So, but overall, I was happy with the battery life and the sacrifices made. That's show me another small camera, this small, that has better battery life. They're just not out there. All of the small, good quality cameras are really chew through those small batteries that are in them. Those are the pros. Now let's talk a little bit about the cons. Well, the first one I want to talk about is this lens specifically. I'll show you some sample images, and stay tuned to the end. I'll throw up some more sample images that I took in Italy with this camera and both these lenses. But this lens exhibits terrible vignetting at 16. You got to zoom in a little bit. But I mean, not just darkening in the corners, but an actual clipping. I believe you're seeing a bit of the lens. And it is correctable in Lightroom with the software, but straight out of the camera, it looks terrible, and it's kind of embarrassing that it's that bad. So that really is the lens itself, not the camera. But if you're going to get it with this little kit lens, and it's other than that, it's quite a nice kit lens with really good optical stabilization. I was happy with the handheld video shots. I was happy with my slower shutter speed photos using this. And it's got a little power zoom on the side. That's a little bit of annoyance because I hit that accidentally more often than not. But it also has a little power zoom right here above the shutter button that allows you to zoom in or out. And it's very point and shoot in that fact, but of course it is, as I said, an interchangeable lens. You can put on something like the little prime, and then of course that little button up there doesn't do anything unless you leave digital zoom on. Don't do it. It's not worth doing that. Well, I said the little flip-up screen is nice, but what do you sacrifice for that? Well, there's no electronic viewfinder. So that means that this screen is your only way to see what you're shooting. Most of the time that was okay. There were some brighter conditions, direct Italian sunlight with no clouds in the sky, where it became difficult to see. There is a setting that I found out halfway through the trip called Sunny Mode for your LCD. It really jacks up the brightness and the contrast and helps you see what's going on better. Still not as good as being able to put your eye up to a shaded electronic viewfinder or an optical viewfinder. And it does drain the battery life a little bit faster. So, no electronic viewfinder. Another sacrifice that you make with this small camera size is it's very limited in its customization, extremely so. You can make some changes to the dial here and the center button, but really the only truly customizable button you have is the little question mark / delete button down here in the bottom right corner, and you can assign that to something else. But for most of the changes you're going to be doing with this camera, most of the features and setting changes, you're going to be digging through the menu. Which brings me to the next part, touchscreen. When this camera was announced, it said touchscreen. I said, yes! One of my biggest complaints with the A6000 was lack of touchscreen. Here I thought they had fixed that. Make no mistake about it. This touchscreen is absolutely terrible and worthless. In the menu, it doesn't work at all. There is no registration of touching. The only time it works, and you can't change any settings on the screen either. The only thing you can do is tap this little button right here that will then let you take a picture by tapping. It is supposed to focus first. I found that to be very hit or miss. You are also supposed to be able to set your focus points via touch. I have found that to be very hit or miss. So, in short, if you were excited about buying this camera primarily because of a touchscreen, please don't. And my last con is that generally, I should actually put this under the first part, under pros, generally this is a very snappy camera. Here's a burst rate, high burst rate on full raw images. Quite good. Focusing, I should going back a little bit, but I forgot to say this. Focusing is excellent. I was doing some panning shots of Vespas and scooters coming by, and although many of them are blurry because of the slower shutter speeds I was trying, the focus, you can tell, is on track, and it was grabbing focus on cars and scooters coming down this hill at about 20 to 30 miles an hour and going by. Really impressed with the focusing capabilities. So that was all the good. The bad is, On longer exposures, it has an enormous amount of processing time. I've never seen that much processing time on a camera. You take a 15 to 30 second exposure, and I did some longer ones and they look great, but it will take 20, 30 seconds or longer to process that image. This is with noise reduction turned off. This is with lens distortion turned off. I think I keep touching the screen. All of those things turned off, and it still was an issue. So I'm not quite sure what it's doing in there, how much information it's gathering and what it's doing with that, but I don't see that on other cameras. So if you're buying this for longer exposure images, multiply times 2 the amount of time you're going to be waiting for each shot you take to take it, and then the processing. Go back to the pros for a second. You know, customizable button-wise, it's pitiful. I said there's one, but inside the menu, you have the micro focus adjustments to really dial in focus with certain lenses. You've got all kinds of bracketing options. As I mentioned, you've got that big menu option as well. You've got zebra for highlights, and you've got focus peaking for manual focus assist. Some lenses are going to be better than others. And you have a good selection of E-mount lenses for Sony. I would be quite happy for most of the time carrying around this camera with a nice E-mount lens. Not so much this kit lens, and yes, I'd be sacrificing some of the weight and size, but overall that would be a wonderful compromise. There are quite a few cameras in this smaller size, but not many of them that have a sensor as large as an APS-C size sensor. If you are really into selfies, it certainly is something you should consider. If you're intrigued by most of the features of this camera, but want that EVF, I think you should consider the A6000, and we should hear about an A6100 sometime in the next 6 months from when this video is going up, I'd suggest. That sounds a little bit far out, but I think that's about right, maybe a little bit longer. Overall, I was quite happy to carry it around. As I said, I'll put a link to some pictures in Italy that I've taken with this camera. 2, some of the videos we did. Video quality was excellent. And just generally, a little blog post with some additional information. If you've got any questions about this camera, if you can't figure out if it's the right one for you, or if you want to suggest alternatives that it should be compared to, just leave a comment right down below. If you found this review helpful, hit the thumbs up button. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit that button as well. That is an easy way to thank me for my time. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.